Howdy, y'all, and welcome to the Dota League Season 5. This is the first Division 2 American game that is actually being played, but unfortunately, it's not going to be played on the ticket. So if you did buy the MLG Dota League ticket, you can't actually watch these games, and, well, that unfortunately means that you're going to have to listen to me, and you can't actually see it in-game. As sad as that is, hopefully that issue is going to be sorted out shortly. That said, this is going to be a best of two between Boreal Esports and Together We Did It, and it should be pretty interesting at the very least. Both of these teams' lineups are fairly new to me, as just recently, Boreal have been playing with a different five-man lineup, and they are currently right now lacking 470 as well as Futsa and several other players that they've now replaced. So let's see how this new lineup works out for them, and similar for Together We Did It. Although Jipples and Taku have been in the lineup there, it's not really a lineup that I've seen play very often outside of the joint Dota League. They really aren't all that involved, and hopefully they bring something new to the table. Looks like we're having some sort of server issues, so bear with us as we try to get all of this sorted out. Huh. Well, this is very peculiar. Looks like we have some sort of issue with Together We Did It, as they are currently... Okay, never mind, we're all back together, so scratch that. They are currently all ready to go, and we should be able to proceed without any further interruptions. But as I was saying, another lineup that's pretty new to me, and I hope that at least we're going to see something fun from both of these sides. I'm Grandesine, I'm going to be your caster throughout this series, and maybe I'll be joined by a co-caster sometime in the near future, but worst case scenario, you're listening to me, and how bad can that really be? Hope it's not that terrible. Either way, we're going to see a couple early bans come out, and right now it's incredibly vanilla, and honestly nothing really noteworthy. Axe, Troll, Brewmaster. Although maybe a couple months ago, Troll and Axe would look pretty peculiar in these first ban slots, over the past couple weeks especially, these heroes have really come into vogue, as we're also really just not talking about much. Maybe I can send over the chat, even though there is a 2-minute delay, it should be able to catch up soon enough. Juggernaut going to be banned out by Boreal, and a first pick IO from Together We Did It. But yeah, right now there really isn't anything that I have to bring to the conversation. Usually this is when I use my banter with a secondary caster, or primary caster for that matter, actually fill the air. Because the first pick IO, although it is a good pick and not a very peculiar one, it doesn't really offer much to talk about. There's a lot of heroes that could go together with that IO. Tiny, there's Slark available into the pool, Phantom Assassin, just a whole plethora of heroes that could benefit from having that IO partnership. Boreal Esports are going to go ahead and attempt to counter it somewhat, at the very least, with their first pick, a support that they're fairly comfortable with in the Disruptor for themselves. Being able to glimpse one of the heroes back from the relocate is an invaluable tool, and as well as putting the Static Storm kinetic field on top of them once they jump in is really useful utility to have on your side, and stops most tiny combinations in their tracks, especially pre-BKB. And even after BKB, for the main carry, IO, if he's sent away, is not going to be able to offer very much towards his partner. Clockwork, secondarily picked up by Boreal, is going to give them some other setup for the Static Storm, although not mandatory, is a pretty decent combo in its own right, as well as just giving them a solid initiator. If he can isolate that IO, IO is not going to have a fun time, although he can tether out of the cogs and what have you. If IO is spotted out alone, he can be ripped to shreds. It is going to be the ever-classic IO-Tiny combination for Together We Did It, as they'll just slam pick their IO combo right off the bat, and it's a pretty solid way of doing things. It's going to mitigate Boreal's ability to actually counterpick that and take that Tiny away from them, and hopefully it's something that they're comfortable with for their sake at the very least. IO Tiny, fairly low armor, and both strength heroes can be susceptible to a lot of damage coming out from Boreal depending on the situation. It looks like the idea is to throw this IO Tiny towards the mid, and even if it's not, bending out the Viper is going to be a pretty solid course of action for Together We Did It. Just a very annoying hero to play up against, and also very annoying for Tiny and IO in particular. Kiting around the Tiny is a great way to deal with him, even if he does get that Black King bar I was talking about a little bit earlier, which he probably will, in all honesty, up against a Disruptor. Having some sort of slow just way to run around him. Alrighty. So we'll just wait as we look towards these next couple of bans. Together We Did It very low on their reserve time. I'm not exactly sure what they're most scared of. Even though Boreal have a decent combination to start things off. There isn't really anything that immediately comes to mind that's mandatory to really get those heroes going. They'll ban out the Storm Spirit. It is going to leave a Skywrath Mage in the pool for Boreal if they want to snag that up, and it could be a pretty mean combo with the Clockwork and Disruptor both. But it would also be two squishy supports, and maybe Boreal decide against that for some reason or another. As far as the support pool is concerned, Vengeful Spirit has been untouched and would be a valuable asset, especially for Together We Did It, having a defensive swap up against a Clockwork, and even against a Disruptor to a certain extent. And that plus damage on Tiny cannot be underestimated. They'll ban out the Skywrath Mage, and, well, I'd expect them to pick up the Venge, but maybe they have something else in mind, and that could be interesting. It's instead going to be a Magnus for them. A lot of ways to start these fights on their own terms, may it be from a off glimpse into a kinetic field, static, storm, clockwork hookshot, blinking Magnus into an RP. It can get very scary, and Boreal Esports may be primed for a Phantom Assassin pick of their own, or at the very least a hero that abuses that in power. What that might be is still yet to be seen. There's a pretty deep pool where that is lying, and it is a way to kind of abuse the IO pick, even though he is going to make Tiny an absolute beast and offer him a lot of pushing power, as well as the ability to come into fights instantly. IO also lacks a decent amount of lockdown. You can get away with some sort of mobile carry, and as long as you're the ones dictating the pace of the game, IO Tiny cannot find that foothold that they really want to, and it looks like that's going to be Boreal's plan. 15 seconds left. As Together We Did It, going to snag up the Dazzle for themselves. It's a pretty sick sustained combination, the IO Dazzle as far as supports are concerned, but I also fear for them. If that axe wasn't first banned out, it might very well have been picked up by Boreal. We'll just have to see how they're going to be able to utilize it. For the most part, this early laning stage for them is going to be fairly passive. There's not actually much rotation ability coming out from these two supports. IO will mostly be tied to the knee of Tiny, and maybe every once in a while goes off for a stack or two. And Dazzle, although Poison Touch is okay, it's not the greatest. And Boreal Esports going to snag up the Silencer for themselves, yet another tool that they can have to be annoying to this Tiny IO. If they want to stop them from coming into the fight, they can preemptively global silence. Right now, that really seems like it's the most useful tool that they have. Or most useful application of that global silence, but even so, it's just a really annoying hero to play up against. Together We Did It. It's going to be a Night Stalker for them, so scratch that about not being aggressive. Although we're not going to see very many lane rotations from these supports, they will enable the Night Stalker to go very aggressively by himself. And we'll have to see how effective his pick is going to be. I, for one, really am not a huge fan of Night Stalker, but after the buff seen in the most recent of patches, or a couple patches ago, rather, he is a very potent threat when it comes to the vision that he offers for the team. Ban coming out from Boreal is going to be targeted towards that Batrider, and a pretty good one, too. It would be really nice for Together We Did It to find a hero to start fights for them, because they really are lacking somebody in that department. They might shy away from picking up a puck that AoE Silence and the Silencer both could absolutely wreck the hero. But something along that similar vein, I think Batrider probably would have been one of the better ones for them. Just be able to pick up that momentum early and keep it going. Constantly ganking once you have the lasso off of cooldown. Where this Night Stalker is actually going to lane is also another question that is brought up by his pick coming out from TWDI. Is usually we're seeing the Tiny and Io being thrown towards the mid lane, so maybe it is just an aggressive dual lane coming out with the Dazzle plus the Night Stalker, or maybe we see the Tiny solo up the mid lane, Night Stalker farm up, or even mid lane Night Stalker. It's not unheard of. A decent amount of flexibility coming out from both sides, in all honesty. Clockwork's probably going to be thrown towards the off lane, and Magnus towards the mid, safe lane farming Silencer. But they do have ways to shuffle that up depending on what matchups they expect and what they think they're going to be up against. Boreal Esports currently have a lot of time to think about this last pick, but they don't need any of it. They're going to settle on the Slark for themselves, and right now there's just not a lot of tools that Together We Did It can use to lock down a Slark or keep him in place. Most of it is going to be easily purged off and not really bother the fish all that much. Night Stalker's Silence, although it's nice to have silences up against the Slark, it just doesn't come out fast enough, really. Cast animation being too projected will allow the Slark to get up a Dark Pact, and at that point, you're pretty much useless. And, well, unless Tiny gets absolutely fed, I don't really see them having enough damage to deal with the Slark either. This is going to be a very problematic pick for Together We Did It, and a lot of pressure onto the Night Stalker and Tiny to actually accomplish stuff inside this game. An empowered Slark is no joke, and the last pickup for TWDI is going to be the Necrophos, something that's very annoying to play up against for sure, but is it going to lead them to victory? I'm not sure they're going to be able to delay these fights out long enough. Blinken RP into Slark Assassination. Boreal Esports, it feels like they're going to be controlling the fights a little bit too much, but all the hopes for Together We Did It. It'll be interesting to see how they play together as far as the formalities and introducing everybody that is on these heroes. It is going to be Jipples playing on the Night Stalker. One, or Mario on the IO, as he was called inside the lobby. Gex going to be playing on the Tiny. We lost GG on the Slark, and that'll leave last but not least Necrophos by Taku on Boreal. At least a couple more familiar names, and a couple new names as well. We are going to have, oh dear, I'm going to mispronounce this, apologies now. Luchni on the Silencer, Schwan on the Disruptor. Slark is going to be handled by 747, mid lane Magnus by TT or Tiburon, and off lane Clockwork going to be played by KVH. Very interesting how these lanes are going to shape up for Boreal. Maybe they're trying out something new. I, for one, am really curious to see how they actually play this out and how it works out for them. Alrighty then. We are going to start off with the posits. Fairly typical, although unfortunate. Let's see how these lanes are going to shake down. Looks like defensive tri-lane coming out from Boreal up against an aggressive Night Stalker. Whether he has support or not is another story, and for now it looks like Dazzle is meandering down towards the bottom lane. Solo offlane Night Stalker. How is this actually going to work out for TWDI, I wonder? I don't really see him getting that much. Disruptor as well as Silencer are very good poking supports. They can be very annoying to this Night Stalker and make sure that he really doesn't get much. Not the most mobile of heroes, 295 movement speed without boots, as well as without nighttime and the buff from Hunter in the Night. Jipples needs to play this so very carefully. He is tanky with 5 base armor, stout shield, and a decent chunk of HP as well as HP regen to boot. But I really do fear for Jipples, because it really feels like he is kind of a linchpin for TWDI's lineup to actually make sure that Tiny's able to get fully online. Jipples is going to be hiding around the trees. That doesn't seem to be doing very much of anything. He could be in a decent amount of risk. The power of a level 1 Pounce is not to be underestimated if he's spotted out. So this Night Stalker, I doubt that he's going to be able to get to Bounty Rune, but at the very least, he'll see what lane he's up against. Currently, it's 747 showing down this top rune spot and bottom rune, being completely uncontested by Boreal. Looks like they're just going to give that the way of the Necrophos more often than not. Let's see if there's actually any fights brewing. Night Stalker's just going to book it. Actually, not much that he wants to do with that, so it's just going to be one Bounty Rune going towards either side. Slark going to scare it and IO down towards bottom. I suppose that's also a sensible choice. That secures you the bottle at minute 0. For the IO, and that is going to be a very useful tool for them, allowing the Tiny to have a much more comfortable time inside this mid lane. 1v1, Tiny versus Magnus is slanted towards the Mag, but both heroes are able to get a decent amount of farm. With the IO, extra poking power, as well as the ability to make some stacks for Tiny later on, it should be having a pretty decent time here. Not really much that the Magus can do, except for periodically throw out a shockwave, and he's currently down the bottle advantage, although he won't be for long, since he is completely rushing it with 2 pool Tangos and a stick. Up towards top, Jipples is going to be at the receiving end, a little bit of that poking power that I was talking about earlier on, but he is able to trade effectively, at least for now, with the Disruptor. These lanes are fairly passive, and I don't see very much killing potential, especially at bottom, so I'm not actually going to look at that lane much, if at all. Necrophos should be able to farm, and KVH should be able to get experience, but that's about it. The actual CS that Clockwork's able to get out of this lane is limited, and what he is going to get is going to be considered a blessing for him. For now, I really have bad feelings about Jipples. I think that he's probably the most likely one to give up that first blood, although KVH does drop low and doesn't have much more regen than the handful of Tangos that he was starting out with. This could be problematic up against the Heartstopper aura of the Necrophos. More than likely, we'll have to ferry out some regen in one way, shape, or form. Blades of Wisdom coming out from the Silencer are going to be yet another annoying tool for the Night Stalker, but outside of being zoned out, he's almost found his level 2, so not all is terrible for Jipples, but he's still being zoned very effectively, and I think this is kind of the fear. He's not getting kills, he's not really accomplishing much of anything down on this top lane. Bounce back from the Cogs is going to drain Taku of a little bit of his mana, but KBH also not having a great time, but a lot better than Night Stalker, sitting at level 3, and really that's probably the biggest takeaway from this early laning stage. Necrophos is getting farmed, but so is the Slark. Tiny's getting farmed, but then again, so is the Magnus, doing especially well, considering it's a dual lane. Now this regeneration rune is going to help him quite a bit. Follows that up, but still no first blood. Honestly, I don't see a clear opportunity where it's going to happen unless one of these offlaners oversteps their bounds. That's probably the most likely course of action for both of these teams where you actually get to see some blood. Outside of that, level 6s, as usual, are pretty crucial here. Hookshot on the Clockwork might be able to set up, especially on an isolated Wisp, maybe even a Dazzle if he gets a little bit lucky. And level 6 for the IO himself will be able to find some relocates here and there. He is going to ferry out a fresh stack of tangos for himself. Jipples under tower now is going to find himself a little bit more experience. The pull is not currently being utilized by these supports, so it is going to be one full creep wave experience, which is a godsend for Jipples. This is going to propel him very close into those higher levels, level 3 for now, but that is going to catch him up slowly towards this Clockwork, although still at a disadvantage, has found himself a nice little boon. We Lost GG is going to run a pull through, and it looks like he's going to be able to clean up these creeps as well as find him some decent levels on this Dazzle. But really, these supports, although they do scale well throughout the game, aren't the flashiest. From both sides, it's actually going to be the IO to get first blooded as he gets pulled back under tower. And now Gix dropping low. He is looking for another shockwave. Can he find it? No, the right click's going to be enough. Double kill for Tiburon. Holy cow. I was not expecting the Magnus to do this well, even though he was CSing a little bit less than the tiny. This completely makes up for it. And now he's well on his way towards a very, very fast Blink Dagger. He's going to throw out the Courier towards himself, and it looks like he's just going to crow the bottle. And there you have it. Although the Courier is now completely slowed, it doesn't matter. That's going to be Tiburon sticking in lane and already halfway towards a blink. It's sub 4 minutes in. Huge play is coming out from this mag that I really didn't think would be possible. It looks like Mario just caught way out of position, potentially in the river under his tower. I apologize for not seeing that. Not what I expected at all. He has made himself quite a large stack for the Tiny to Avatos down a little bit later. A quad stack, if I can actually count. And that is going to be a nice boon for TWDI. So not all is lost for them, but I think that was something that they needn't give towards Boreal's side, and this Magnus could get very scary very soon, and maybe is that action maker that Boreal needed. Tier 1 tower down towards bottom, gonna take a decent amount of damage from a siege creep lane pushing in, or wave pushing in with some help from Taku, and it's actually going to be a Midas for this Necrophos. He is a hero that can get away with it. He relies on levels very heavily, and likes to have that acceleration. Also, really likes to have a lot of items at his disposal. It's kind of hard to build them, but the Midas helps remedy that fact. Clockwork dropped low, and does need to be careful. We don't have a level 6 yet from the Necrophos, but that's going to be coming in shortly. After one Midas usage, that's probably going to be enough, so KVH is going to make his way all the way back towards base, because that's pretty much all that he can do. And in the meantime, Jipples, it's now his time to shine, although I don't think he's actually going to be able to get very many kills throughout this game. Really, it's just isolated lanes and a farm fest, except for that first blood that I completely missed, so really I haven't seen much of anything. Well, for Night Stalker's build, it's actually going to be a bottle for Jipples. Interesting enough, it's a nice item to have for sure. But I would have liked to see just boots. If not just starting out with boots. He's glimpsed back and now going to take quite a lot of damage. The Pounce misses. 747 not able to connect. Now Jipples will run under the safety of his tier 1 tower. Although, it's a close call. That bottle as well as the Salve and Clarity popped will keep him right back in lane. Now he finds out the silencer low. Going to be voided up. Jipples potentially going to be able to get this kill. But at the return of his own life potentially. Going to be pounced up by 747 after killing off the silencer. Now the man fight ensues. 747 is going to win it, but just barely. If the disruptor wasn't there, it would have been a very dead slug. No level 6 yet for him, but he still has a salve remaining from the laning stage. We Lost GG might be dead here as KVH chasing down the battery assault. Oh, he needs a little bit more damage, and one more smack of his hook is going to secure a 4-1 lead for Boreal. But now Taku with the ultimate dropped into the Clockwork. It's actually not going to kill him off, but one more death pulse is, and now gets those cool 10 Sadist charges for himself. Both offlaners potentially biting off a little bit more than they could chew, and going to end up being a fairly even trade. Just 1 for 1, offlaner for support, and both offlaners are going to be okay with that. Magnus, left alone with the Tiny. They are going to bring in the Night Stalker for now, and Jipples RP solo onto the Tiny, going to pull it back into the Silencer. Toss over the Silencer into Jipples. Gix dropping low, but not low enough with the bottling up coming out from the IO. The IO is keeping him alive. Now they turn to Tiburon. Tiburon dropping low, and they just need a little bit more damage. Can they find it? Shockwave from long range is going to kill off the Tiny, and now Jipples hunting around the tower, but the ring around the roses is going to prove too much for him. And bottling up, Tiburon is going to be completely fine. Jipples not able to connect. Midas on the Necrophos is going to be met by the 1 on the Slark, and really, this game still feels like it's fairly even. The big leaps in power are going to be delayed a little bit for Boreal since they opt to go for the Arcanes first on the Magnus. Although I usually do it myself, when you get this much farm early, maybe you can afford to go for the Blink. We'll just have to see how this pans out for him. First RP, unfortunately, not going to directly get him a kill, but after the fact, it works out pretty nicely for them. Really awkward exchange and maybe better positioning for the Tiny or the IO. Could have been a little bit better. If they had level 6 in the IO, I think they got out there cleanly, very easily. And that is also another one disadvantage of playing the dual lane in the mid. You are sacrificing a little bit of the experience on your farmer to the IO, especially if you don't farm up those stacks, which are still sitting nice and juicy over towards the right. Well then, Clockwork going to maintain his position down the bottom lane even after getting his level 6. Just not feeling there's really a spot for him to gank towards, but I would like to see KVH make some sort of rotation. We'll have to see where that rotation is actually going to land him. Bounty rune secured by the Night Stalker, but Jipple's nighttime is now completely over, and he's going to be back towards daytime for himself, which really isn't a comfortable place for any Night Stalker. And really, that first nighttime really didn't do much for him. IO is going to be dropping low as they try to finish up the stack, but they will be able to do so. They do have that level 6 on the Tiny and are close to it onto Mario, but not close enough. Only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades being close. IO just needs a little bit more to push him over the edge. And then you have the threat of relocates, which is something that Boreal have to keep in mind. But for now, Gik's a little too low. Looks like it's going to be a drums build for the Tiny, and a pretty decent way to go about it too. But he has fallen behind of the Magnus. Got invest to be expected after so many kills go his way. Left alone to their own devices up in the top lane with the Night Stalker rowing tier 1 tower going to be dropping low, and it looks like that's going to be taken potentially by a catapult. Reaper Scythe going to be committed to Juan, but that's not going to be enough to kill him. That level 1 Reaper Scythe, although it's really annoying to get that 30 seconds extra respawn timer, doesn't do enough damage on its own. I think you really need to have a little bit more mana to get off that death pulse, but unfortunately for him, just didn't have it available to him. That's Reaper Scythe on cooldown for nothing gained in return. The rotation up towards top, I didn't even think... Oh, no, it gets in the tower denial, so I suppose they have that going for him. Right now, these graphs should be fairly even, slight advantage towards Boreal, but less than 1,000, and honestly, this advantage really doesn't mean much of anything. Until the Blink Dagger comes out from Tiburon, of course, and there you have it. This advantage is going to net them a faster blink timing, so let's see how Tiburon's going to be able to put it to use. Or TT, as he is tagged up right now. No smoke on the courier is just going to take this Blink Dagger out vanilla. Deep warding mission by We Lost is going to be completely successful as the Dazzle doesn't die and drops a ward, spotting out rotations towards the mid lane as well as the deepest ward that you really can get at this point in the game. And that is going to spot out pretty much everything. Ultimate pop by Jipples as they spot out the poor Silencer. Instant TP out is going to be successful. They look to defend him and they will be able to do so as he makes his way safely back to base. Jipples currently running around and now with the double damage rune. This is probably as scary as Jipples is going to get inside this nighttime, and they maybe set their sights up towards top. They'll find themselves a 747. Night Stalker alone probably can't get this kill unless 747 gets way too overeager. Elite Void and a silence with the double damage rune. Jipples going to drop him low. He probably should be able to get the ultimate off, especially with some jukes. 747 over to the sidelines. It looks like he's going to try to run away. The Void going to be cancelled. It's just going to be an ult TP, and there's nothing the Night Stalker can do about it, but at the very least, he's cost the enemy team 200 gold, which is more than nothing. Okay then, that's your completed phase boots up for Jipples, or at least I would think it would be. And his ultimate is going to wear off, but lucky enough for him, the nighttime is going to be coming out as we have a huge fight breaking on mid. Gek's going to lose his life, hookshot in onto GG. He turns for the poison touch, but nothing to do, especially with the static storm down on the ground. TP in for both Taku as well as Mario, but they really can't do anything as they get completely mopped up. It looks like that Avalanche toss landed on a whole slew of heroes, but just not much that TWDI could do to actually follow that one up. And Boreal will find themselves with a nice objective, although they are forced to use everything. That's exactly what those cooldowns are there for. Disruptor going to bump into the Necrophos, or who's bumped into who? The Reaper Scythe going to be on Schwan, and he's just going to walk away. Level 2 Reaper Scythe now up for Taku, although it wasn't used to get that kill, is going to secure it with a level 1. Doesn't matter, he has that Blink Dagger now up for the Necrophos, and he is finding himself a decent amount of momentum. Currently sitting top of the net worth chart as well as just comfortably doing Necrophos things. And that's going to get scary as this Midas ticks away for him. Right now the Midas on Slark really isn't paid for any comparable items, really. He has the treads as well as the Aquila and a Midas on 747. Although this is more than enough to fight, it's not as scary as a level 11 Necrophos with that Reaper's Scythe, or when he has that Reaper's Scythe, however. Nighttime is now dawning, and this is time for TWDI to call the shots, and let's see where they're going to call. They have a hook shot going to be spent over on the sidelines, catches out Gix, but the Avatos into the Clockwork. KVH gonna lose his life as he gets punched down by the Rockman. Yeah, not a great idea, I must say. Clockwork probably couldn't have survived that. Maybe if he has a blade mail, can do enough return damage in the Tiny to get that kill, but without it, it's more or less a lost cause. And now healed up by the IO, fresh and ready to go, looking towards mid, but Tipperon is going to be able to blink away before the Void comes out, but Jipples has none of this, going to dive deep for his silence onto the silencer, giving him a taste of his own medicine. But actually doesn't do much else than that. Drops the ultimate, trying to keep this on cooldown to extend the night as long as possible. And even though this looks a little awkward when you use that ultimate, it is so scary for the enemy team. I'll just take a second to take a gab at the enemy vision. That's incredibly scary. They see absolutely nothing, and now this nothing is going to be jumping right at them, and it looks like Juan is going to be at the receiving end. Instead, it's going to be the Silencer up towards the high ground. Silenced up and can do nothing. Avatos onto the Magnus, going to be dropped low. ERP's onto 2 with the Static Storm onto 2 as well, but it's just not enough. They bring in the Reaper's Scythe from the south, and that's going to be a clean 2-0 for TWDI. Without vision, taking these fights is so difficult, and Boreal just could do nothing. Tier 1 tower in mid's now going to be pressured out by TWDI, and they chase down the Slark to boot, going to void him up after being silenced. I think 747 again is going to be fine, or is he? The nighttime silence duration just isn't enough to kill off this Slark, and he'll be able to leap up towards the high ground after purging off that poison touch. But TWDI are exerting their map dominance, going to mop up a little bit of a stack for their Tiny, adding insult to injury. Kinetic Field catches out Vision of 3. That's about all it can do. They spot out Mario. But yeah, there just really isn't much that they can accomplish over here right now, just with the lack of vision and control of the map that they have during this nighttime. Tiny now going to be working towards his Agnum Scepter. I think that's going to be a point booster flying out to him any minute now, as soon as he sends it over to the Secret Shop. And yet another double damage rune spotted by Jipples, and he's got to jump into KVH. Point blank hook shot is going to be close. KVH sticks down to the urn. There's nothing he can do about that one, as Jipples just gladly walks away. That's hook shot on cooldown for a minute. And Jipples, the luckiest darn Night Stalker that ever did walk this earth, has found himself another double damage rune and another kill. Dagon build for the Necrophos is going to mean that bursting down this Slark is also pretty easy business, and Shadowblade just isn't going to cut it. He really needs some sort of survivability on 747, but what that is, I'm not exactly sure. Right now, the safest place for him to farm is inside the enemy woods. Blink forward for the combo onto the poor Silencer, and man, he just can do nothing. Avatos on the Disruptor going to be ripped to shreds as well. It's a dominating spree for the Necrophos, and 11-7 as TWDI are starting to put together this momentum, and this night is going wonderfully for them. Not really much else that you can talk about, and the Necrophos is starting to pick up that momentum, and very fastly too. Tier 1 tower mid going to be punched down. They just need a little bit more damage, and they can chunk it. They do have the tower glyphed up by Boreal's side, but one toss ought to do it, or tossing a couple of right clicks. Whatever it may be, that is going to be more map control collapsing around them. And still about a minute or so of nighttime. Speaking of Night Stalker, he's going to be able to escape. Looks like he was jumping away from the Slark down towards bottom. Maybe going for a little bit something more. Relocate down towards bot as they look towards 747. He's going to be able to make the pounce and ultimate. Trying to escape. Avalanche is not going to connect. The IO balls are going to put a little bit of damage in 747, but heads up play coming out from the Slark, and maybe they can look for a turn. They have the Clockwork close. IO is going to pull himself out, and currently this could be the makings of a 2v4, and Silencer offering the global insub base, and I think it's probably wise if Taku and Gix get the heck out of dodge. They'll spot out the Necrophos as he blinks away, and now blinks on top of a Dire Observer ward. Clockwork looking for an angle. Can he actually find it? Doesn't look like the answer is yes. And, well, TWDI, they could be in a bit of a corner right now. The large camp is being pinged out by Boreal. Hookshot in, going to catch out Gix. He's stunned up by the Centaur, now stunned up by the Clock. The Global Silence is going to do a decent amount of work, but the punches onto KVH are also significant. RP onto 3 into the Kinetic Field Static Storm. It's going to the end of 3 heroes from TWDI, and a nicely executed combination coming out from Boreal. And that is now their turn to hold the momentum. It's daytime, and Night Stalker's Reign of Terror is at its end. You can't really ask for much better at this point in the game. 3-man RP and a 3-man Static Storm pretty much wins you every single fight. There's not really much that you can do to stop that, especially without a BKB. and that's not going to be coming for quite some time. They'll take a tier 1 tower down towards bottom with nothing really in trade for TWDI. They get some space for Night Stalker to farm and a little bit of pressure on the top, but more or less it's negligible. Jipple's going to be working towards an Ags of his zone, and the Slark is going to show his face. But without Darkness popped and without backup, I don't think they can go for this, but that backup might be coming any moment if they relocate on top of him. Let's see. Jipples, he's probably going to have to connect with the Silence to stop 747 from pouncing away, and then they'll connect with the Avatos. It is a possible kill, but not a very easy one. Do they have detection on any of these heroes? No, they don't. Darkness popped, and 747 trying to run away. Blink forward by the Necrovos isn't going to be successful. 747 is a slippery little fish, and he's going to be able to make his way out to safety. Very unfortunate for them. Yeah, I don't really see very many ways where that happens, or where that works for TWDI, unless 747 makes a mistake. But then again, at the very least, you should go for it. Unfortunately, that is Darkness on cooldown for them, but it's really hard to deal with this. My goodness. I just can't get over how small the vision, pretty much the hero heads you see on the map is as far as they can see from the heroes, and even the towers. The amount of information that they're lacking is incredibly scary. And even the wards, too. It's no joke. This is probably the scariest reason to pick Night Stalker, as vision is just so crucial when you're taking a fight. If you don't know where they're coming from, it's a lot harder to prepare for. Darkness wearing off is going to mean that TWDI probably need to back off and farm for a little bit more. They'd really like to have the Aghanim Scepter up for the Tiny, as well as for the Night Stalker before they really start taking fights. Most importantly, just to accelerate Tiny's farm, they just need a little bit more space. So Gix can get to that full Tiny status. Necrovos, on the other hand, can look for these pickoffs, and if he finds an opening, they can relocate in for the kill. But I think for the most part, these large-scale engagements should be avoided while Boreal have all of their cooldowns up, in particular Global Silence and RP. Well then, the pace of the game has slowed down a little bit, at least for TWDI. Boreal are pushing into the mid lane, but it doesn't look like any huge efforts to defend this are actually going to be mounted by TWDI, and rightfully so. Tier 1 tower is already a little too low. They look for the Dagon combo onto 747. It's not going to kill him immediately, but they do get the Death Pulse to finish the deal. RP onto 3 as well as the Static Storm. Taku dropping low, but he's getting healed up. Will they actually be able to finish him off with Clockwork jumping in? They will. It's a double kill for Clock, but a buyback on the Necrovos. They want back in. Tiny going to be killed off by the Shockwave as Mario makes it over towards the left of this fight. Necrovos with this buyback secures himself the double, finishing off the Sansa, but it doesn't look like he'll be able to find any more. Blink canceled, and there's absolutely no way they can actually cancel that TP in range. Jipple's a little too far for that Void. Very interesting fight coming out from TWDI. Probably not worth the buyback on the Necrophos, but at the very least they get a truck ton of experience onto this Necro. And right now, I think he should be leading the level department, and indeed is doing so. Maxed out into both the Death Pulse and the Heartstopper Aura, and very close to getting that Sadist up to top marks as well. Sitting on the point booster is pretty tanky, but this is going to slow down TWDI for some time, especially since they also were forced to commit the Darkness. Just more farming space, I suppose. Kill score completely tied up 13-13, and as far as the actual metrics are concerned, zeroed out. You can't get the graph more even than that, or maybe you can. I don't know. It's actually a 60 gold advantage towards Boreal. Take that as you will. The experience is a little bit more substantial, but pretty much exactly the same. Any momentum that TWDI once had has pretty much gone down the drain, and things are starting to even out again. They'll bump into the Slark. Smoke is going to pop, but they don't have detection on the ground, or at least anywhere close. Slark going to be able to leap over to the sidelines, but bumps right into Taku, going to eat a Death Pulse to the face. He does have the Dark Pact working for him. Pounce over to the sidelines, currently playing Ring Around the Rosies with the entire TWDI team. And it looks like he might lose his life, and, well, also looks like he might be able to escape. Dusted up, he is going to be able to purge off some of those slows, dropping low, but not low enough. Where's the Necrophos to get in that Blink Dagon? He just was a little too far away, and Ultimate on Slark's going to keep him up at a healthy amount of regen. There's absolutely nothing they can do about it. A lot of time wasted by 747 over in that fight. Jipples, for the third or fourth time this game, is going to be sitting on a double damage rune, although this one doesn't look to be as impactful. Tower Deny in mid is going to match another Tower Denied, or that they denied up towards top, and maybe give them a slight edge as far as Tower Gold is concerned, but really we are just sitting on a waiting game for TWDI to pick up these Aghanim Scepters for themselves. Necro 2 should be working towards one. Darkness committed again by the Necrovos, but there's your combo on a 747 out of nowhere. That Necrovos combo is nothing to joke about, and really you do need extra stats onto this Slark, or else you are just absolutely up the river without a paddle. There's nothing you can do about it. when you're Slark, all he has to boost up his survivability is a straight Ogre Club. He does have the BKB in the works, which is going to be a valuable asset to have. But it might not be enough. Relocate onto the Silencer inside the river. Global Silence going to be spent, but a little too late. They won't be able to get the Avatos. They turn for the RP, connects on the 2. But still the Silencer low. Do they actually focus him down? They lose the IO with KVH jumping in. The Avatos is going to connect onto the Magnus, popping him out of the cogs as Gix is dropped down to the Blade Mail and damage of said Blade Mail. Killing spree for Jipples as he mops up one more kill. And across the map, it's 2 for 2, but that fight in particular not really favoring TWDI as they lose both the IO and the Tiny. And honestly, I think they could have done that a little bit cleaner. Maybe just decide not to go in altogether, especially with the panic global silence coming out. Or not really panic, but the global silence being spent, more or less. Night Stalker, invised up. Going to spot out Porchuan, and now with the urn and a couple more right clicks, it looks like he's just going to be run down. Disruptor, accepting his fate, is just going to stand there as he can do nothing. Nobody close enough to actually offer their help. Clockwork Hookshot still cooling down. RP still cooling down from that jungle fight. And Jipples, in this nighttime around, has been able to find a decent amount of momentum. Currently sitting in 5-1-1 after opening up 1-1-1. Has gone 4-0, now sitting on a decent spree for himself. Night Stalker Agdams is online as well, so we do have full map hacking gauge. Currently, Vision is the name of the game when you're dealing with a Night Stalker, and there's not much that you can do to stop him. The Flare is going to fly through and be annoying a little bit for TWDI, but for now, both teams want to keep their distance as Boreal want nothing to do with TWDI's team during this nighttime. Wait a minute or so, and then we can put together our full ultimate combo. But for now, there's really not anything they can be comfortable in doing. Night Stalker behind the tier 1 tower, they'll be able to take this one out very easily. 2 range creeps and a catapult. They should be able to notch the last hit too, as Jipples finds that. Now they have the Agnum Scepter up for the Necrophos, and this combo is going to get yet even scarier, and that only leaves the Tiny to mop up his, and he is going to, in just a couple of seconds, that is your complete Ags up for him. BKB is going to be the choice of business for Tiburon on the Magnus. It is going to stop the damage coming out from Necrophos, most importantly, as well as the Avatos and the silence from Night Stalker. All around, it's just a nice item for Magnus to have to ensure that he's able to get the initiations off, which is pretty crucial for Boreal. I'm not sure if there's really anything else that would have been better this game. Night Stalker's 9 has just worn off as he gets the last of his map hack vision. Going to drop the darkness immediately, denying even more away from Boreal, and now they need to be careful. Blink into the river, coming out from Tiburon, the hookshot into Jipples. Jipples in a whole heap of trouble as the battery assault is going to town, as well as the blade mail, and there's nothing he can do but fall. Very well executed by Boreal, finding out that Night Stalker with limited vision, as well as just getting the kill cleanly. Without any backup coming out from TWI, it's something that they can do very easily. This Necrophos is still getting incredibly fat, and Taku would love to find a couple more kills in the next coming seconds. He is spotted out by an Observer Ward, and right now Boreal are clumped up and are going to make that a lot harder for him to accomplish. If the supports are out pushing a lane by themselves, they're pretty much just Necrophos bait. Well then, a tiny Agnum Scepter, although on its own isn't the scariest of items, useful definitely. But it's not going to be the base racing Tiny that you're scared of inside the late game. It is going to propel him towards that status a lot faster than Tiny's without the item, and we'll just have to see how the next couple minutes of this game are concerned. The dewarding vigilance coming out from Boreal is really helping them quite a ton. Although TWDI are able to maintain one of their wards, that's about it as we take a look. Sentries galore across the map. And that's really what's keeping them alive right now. Slark has had enough of these Necrophos Dagon shenanigans as 747 commits towards BKB, and now it's Boreal's time to fight. It's daytime, they have all of their ultimates, they have a fresh BKB on 747 and a fresh BKB, or rather a 10-second BKB up for the Magnus, and I think it's time to look towards some objectives. Leading the charge is 747, and he has that Shadow Blade ready to go. Going to pop that as he looks towards the jungle, and now going to find himself an IO Tiny. He probably wants to go on to Mario, and it looks like he's going to do just that. Pounce is going to connect, and now with the damage coming out from the Dark Pact, it is going to be enough, and now they're going to be able to skewer back the Tiny. Gix, and a whole heap of trouble with no backup. The IO is what he was relying on. It's going to be a clean double for 747 as Boreal find themselves a very high priority 2 kills with that smoke and a very well executed gank at that, and now they open up the Roshan pit towards them. It's not the fastest of Roshans, sure. No major sources of minus armor, no source of minus armor at all for that matter, and their sustain is pretty limited, but their Roshan fight and the lack of having an IO Tiny on the enemy team is going to mean that they're going to be able to take it just as well. And TWDI can't get much more out of this map. I swear pretty much every other rune has been a double damage for TWDI. Daku is going to be sitting onto this one as they put some pressure, as much pressure as they can, onto top lane. But a big item pickup for Boreal is this Disruptor's Aghanim Scepter, kind of coming out from left field. I knew he'd be going for it, but it is going to come up very fast, or quickly for Schwan. We have that Aegis up for the Slark, and Boreal are now primed to take a really scary fight. They do commit the Global Silence previously to make sure that they're able to get the IO tiny so no backup can come in. But everything else is at the ready, and they weren't forced to pop the BKBs, as far as I know. Yeah, it looks like their BKBs are still 10 seconds and fully intact. And when those Black King bars are up, TWDI's physical damage is pretty lackluster. You have a Night Stalker with Phase Boots and Necrophos that's fully committed into the magic damage build, and Tiny with Ags. It definitely could be a lot worse for them. And Boreal, I'd really like to see them push the advantage a little bit more. Even though it's scary during the nighttime, right now is their best chance to fight. They don't want to take this late up against a Necrophos as well as an IO Tiny. I don't think there's really any situation where you want to. The amount of sustain that comes through that combination is pretty ridiculous, as well as just having that delete button with the Reaper's Scythe Aghanimed up. There's nothing you can do about it. The extra respawn time can be damning. They'll find 747. They are going to jump him. Reaper's Scythe committed, and Dagon. The combo doesn't kill him instantly. Now they return for the RP onto 2, and 747 still has the Aegis. Is even going to be forced to pop it. He does lose the Aegis at the very least. Brave very early on to Tabu. Hookshot into Jipples. Going to cogs in both Jipples as well as Mario, and the IO is currently completely hosed. Global Silence up can do nothing. Jipples trying to run away, but not going to happen against the leash of the Slark. And what was supposed to be the jump coming out from TWDI is going to net them 2 kills, and now potentially onto Taku. They'll jump forward, and they will be able to bring down the Necrophos, and all they lose for it is an Aegis, and honestly, that's what it's there for. Boreal, huge victory for them. In just the last couple minutes, they find one little inkling of an advantage that they have. They get those major items, and they're putting them to use in a big way, and really hitting their timing window effectively. Tier 2 tower up top is going to be the next word of business for Boreal, and we'll have to see when or if they're going to be able to take it, or if TWDI even wants to defend. Tiny without his IO really can't do much, and Gex, he has to go for the BKB next, but BKB isn't going to save you against Boreal. You have the Aghanim Scepter Disruptor ulti that's going to stop your BKB from coming out. You have an a hookshot coming out from the Clockwork, soon to be Aghanim. They'll offer him a 12-second cooldown, maybe getting 1 or 2 off inside the fight. You have an RP, and you have the physical damage coming out from the Slark, and if you don't time the BKB after the Global Silence, that goes through it as well. Bottom line is that Boreal's team deals with Black King bars very effectively. They're going to drop the Darkness to try to secure TWDI a defense at the high ground if it was necessary, or at least scare Boreal back, but it doesn't really do much other than put it on cooldown and extend Nighttime's duration for a little bit longer. And Nightstalker is starting to fall off, even though the vision doesn't really ever stop being a useful utility for your team. It's really not enough. Gem on the Dazzle might help them back into this game, and they do have boosted travel in the Necrophos, but it looks like they just need a little bit more time. Necrophos, even though he is scary inside the team fights, when the BKBs are on, not so much, and he's not very tanky on the front lines either. 8 armor, 1600 HP. It's by no means shabby, but then again, it's also very easy for Boreal to eat through that. Scotty is going to be the next choice for Slark, and he's going to have that very shortly. And now the stacking combination isn't all that scary for him. We saw the full combo being dropped onto his face. Tabu can no longer find those solo kills. The HP on Slark is a little bit too much for him to handle. And he'll need some backup to actually bring him down, and no BKB up, which is just not something that he can reliably get to work out into his favor. And I think Boreal, they'll be comfortable waiting for the next Roshan before they aggressively look to go high ground, but these tier 2 towers are a different story entirely. Once it's daytime, I'd look to see them take another push. Scotty, now freshly completed up by that Slark, is going to be delivered to 747, and maybe this is the time that they want to go for it anyway. They have a big leap of power, which really isn't met by TWDI. As I already talked about, the BKB isn't going to be doing near as much for the Tiny as the Scotty is going to be doing for the Slark, especially with Empower. That extra 50% damage and 50% cleave is pretty darn sick. And 747, not only is he going to block a camp, it looks like he's going to jump into the Dazzle. He finds himself a bigger fish to fry. With the Global Silence, Taka can do nothing. He's going to drop down just to the Slark with a little help from the Global. We lost GG. Can't even get the Grave off onto himself as he's obliterated double kill for 747 as he goes to town. This Slark is a one-man wrecking crew, and although I was a little bit hesitant about the Shadow Blade earlier on. It's really paying off now, being able to find so many openings for ganks. And the momentum just really is falling out of TWDI's sails. Even though it's not a damning advantage as far as the numbers are concerned, it really feels like TWDI can't take effective fights, and they're not split pushing enough with this Tiny. Nor can they actually do that safely, but I think that's really the only course of action. Taking a 5-on-5 engagement up against Boreal just isn't an option. Even though they commit to Global Silence, they only commit to Global Silence. And they have everything else at their disposal. Magnus gets tower destruction on the tier 2 tower bottom, and it looks like it's time for Boreal to swing mid. Or at the very least, look to take a fight. They'll mop up the enemy woods, and that's pretty much all she wrote. Right now, the wind is in Boreal's sails, and TWDI needs something to do about that. Or they need a way to do something about that, and I'm not exactly sure what that is. Night Stalker on his own isn't a potent threat. Earlier on, the supports were pretty squishy, but with Point Booster, Force Staff up on the Silencer, Complete Aghanims on the Disruptor, as well as what looks like to be the making of Force Staff for him too, he's going to be kited around and just isn't doing enough damage. This is very lackluster damage for 32 minutes in the game. To take it lightly, in all honesty, TWDI are pretty much lacking in that department unless the Tiny gets a major damaging item or even just some attack speed from an Assault Cuirass or something of that sort. We'll see. TWDI, they're grouped up, looking towards mid lane. And we'll just have to see if this works out for them. They'll try to put some pressure on a tier 2 tower by themselves, but this feels like it's so risky. They'll leave the Tiny out in the front lines. He has that Black King Bar, but will he even be able to get it off this fight? If the fight breaks out, they're going to jump in, look for the skewer back. He pops his BKB and then hits the tower. This might be a tier 2 going the way of TWDI, as the BKB preemptively pop means they'll be able to secure it, or will they? 162 damage. They're going to stop right before deny range. Hookshot in onto the Necrovos. TP attempt is going to be denied by Battery Assault. Nataku drops. That is going to be the end of the Necrovos' life, as they have plenty of backup to bring him down. They don't even take the tier 2. Jumping forward, Magnus is looking for the RP, finds it solo onto Jipples as Hookshot goes over the IO. IO is going to be destroyed by KVH, but does have some backup coming out from Gex. I have a toss in KVH, but not enough damage as they're able to cleave down the IO. That's going to be a 3 for 0, and they're not done yet. They still have the Static Storm and attacking him up. If they get any vision of the Night Stalker, they might be able to glimpse him back, but right now Jipples is just a tad too strong at 520 movement speed with Phase Boots activated. But now it's Boreal's time to snap back, and snap back they will do. Tier 2 tower in mid, this time is going to be taken by them outright. No deny shenanigans. In fact, it isn't going to be denied, and it's low, but definitely not worth losing 3 heroes for it. If that's high ground, maybe, but even then, I'm really hesitant to say it. Boreal going to mop up that tier 2 tower for themselves. Aggressive leap forward by 747 as they want to look for more. Without the Necrovos, the fighting power coming out, TWDI is mood. There really just isn't anything there in the tank. They'll pounce away, they forced out the glyph, and they're going to be happy with what they've gotten since they don't want to fight in the Necrophos. Hookshot into some allies is going to get Clockwork out to safety. He does have that Axe all the way completed. Right now, TWDI, they're going to fall back on some smokes. And it's something that they probably have to do. The advantage is completely snowballed. It's really impressive to see how Boreal have approached this game. For the longest time, 26 minutes it looks about, it was incredibly even, and they just find 1 or 2 fights in their favor, and it all goes downhill from there. TWDI, they weren't able to do the same when the ball was in their court, and really missed a time window where Night Stalker is extremely threatening. He had that one night where he just did so much work, but since then hasn't gotten a single kill, and all he's done is died twice. The Gem and the Aghanim Scepter BKB, it offers nice utility for the team, but still, TWDI need a little bit more time, and I don't think that's time that Boreal are going to give them. But if they do allow this Tiny to farm up, get his Assault Cuirass Manta style online, and you have the Necrovos pick up some major tanking items, looks like it's going to be a BKB for him as well. Maybe like hard Shiva's Refresher. I'm not sure exactly what this Necrophos build is going to be, but just building into some major ticket items, then TWDI might be able to take a fight. Even though Boreal are really scary, their only hero that truly scales into the late game is that Slark. Silencer, super late game, can be considered a very potent threat, but the way he's been played throughout this game is pretty much just as walking global, and that's completely fine, don't get me wrong, but this isn't going to be the late game Silencer that's stolen a million intelligence and is trucking people down like an OD. Hookshot in, into the creeps. Global Silence also come in, but 747 looks for another target. Going to be tossed up in the air, but the damage just isn't there. Gex being focused down. The attack speed still from Scotty is a little too much for him, and he just can't do it. KVH going to lose his life to the Reaper Scythe, Aghanimed up. Excuse me. Gex going to be graved as he tries to turn and fight, but can't do it. Skewer back into the kinetic field static storm. That's an ultra kill for 747, and they're not done yet. Jipple's attempted TP, incredibly hopeful. Making a rampage it is, as 747 mops up the last body. TWDI just couldn't do anything there. Even with the subpar hookshot initiation only landing on a creep, Global Silence didn't do much of anything. Didn't matter. Their Slark is still completely snowballing out of control, and it's not getting any better. This is going to be an assault crash for 747 after that fight. Silencer's the one to pick up the double damage here in this time around. And Boreal there, looking to take this one out. Tier 3 tower down towards bottom is going to be taken out by 747. They have creeps up towards top, disabling the back door protection, so they can just rush straight in front of their creeps and man the charge. Buyback from the Necrophos, but can he actually do much? His Reaper Sight still on cooldown for 10 seconds. He'll be able to counter push, but that's a lot of gold that he really would have liked to and quite honestly needed to be able to spend on his next item. The big ticket items are coming out from Boreal, and the same just can't be said for TWDI. Really, the last major pickup of Necrophos was the Boots of Travel, and that feels like it was forever ago, and right now he's going to spend that up towards top without getting anything in return. And for the Tiny, BKB has done nothing. He's popped it twice, but he hasn't been able to stick on targets. His physical damage inside the team fights is pretty much not even there. Even if this was on even item footing, TWDI just haven't been able to make use of their items as effectively. Slark going to find himself another second life for Boreal, and right now I don't think there's really anything stopping them. That's your Abyssal Blade freshly picked up, and Slark, even though he is very scary late, I think Boreal would be taking an unnecessary risk by dragging out to that point. Right now they have a Slark that can completely go to town without fear for his own life, and then without fear for his own life twice with that Aegis. And now they have the Agnum Scepter up for the Silencer. This is scary. Boreal are taking the slow and steady approach, but I think that's completely, are taking this conservatively, not slow and steady. Throughout the game, maybe, but they should be able to put the pressure on now at 38 minutes into the game. Tier 3 tower and mid should be mopped up very handily by 747 and company. They'll tear out the creep wave with 50% cleave on 747, as well as a cool extra 50% base damage. And Tier 3 tower is not long for this world. TWDI are going to look for a base trade, and although under normal circumstances, Tiny can take this pretty effectively. No Assault Cuirass, no Mantis style. It will mean to get the tier 3 tower, but can they get much more other than that? Global Silence spent as KVH jumps on the Gex. Gex can't win this fight alone, especially now with the Agnum Static Storm on top of him. He can't get the BKB off, and Relocate wasn't spent. They're going to RP onto Dazzle and Io, pull back the Dazzle under the tier 3 tower. Buyback forced out by the Tiny. They hookshot into Jipples in a whole heap of trouble as he gets the last word up. Running into the kinetic field can do nothing. And again, it's going to be dropped down and GG called up by Jipples, and I don't think there's another call that they really could have gone for. Boreal going to open this up with a pretty nice one-game advantage. For about the first half of that game, what looked like a really close one, they've taken advantage and they run with it. A really well-executed game by Boreal, and well, let's see if they're going to be able to bring that back in game number 2 as well and make this a 2-0 victory for them. Thanks for watching. I've been GrandSV here on HeflaTV 2, and if you like the casting, HeflaTV can be found at Twitter, Facebook, and here on Twitch. Other than that, we'll be back in game 2 shortly. See you soon.